everyone, welcome. I'm Pamela Taggi. I'm the Executive and Artistic Director here at Jacob's Pillow, and I want to welcome you in the audience here and everyone online. Great to see you all for this conversation, Legacy Unboxed. And I just want to say how grateful I am to these 5 choreographers who've been here in a kind of retreat for the past 2 days for opening up this conversation to all of us. It's pretty extraordinary. So I want to say how grateful I am. I also want to say what these 5 women have in common is that they are all choreographers with decades of experience. They're choreographers, they're dance makers, they're directors, they're educators. And they are actively involved in creating many projects at this time on top of everything they've already done. So they're taking the time in the midst of their busy lives to think about legacy and what will remain. And that is not something that many of us just in our general life take time to think through. So they're not only thinking it through, but they're thinking it through together, and they're thinking it through together on behalf of the field, which I think is really exciting and momentous. So you can Google them so that you get their full bios. I don't want to take time in this conversation to tell you about them. But what I will do is just, the other thing they all have in common is they have a deep history at Jacob's Pillow. So I'm just going to let you know that we'll start at the end here with Liz Lerman. Her first visit here was in 1985 as a part of the Inside Out series. So this is actually Liz's 40th anniversary of her first visit. So we have Joanna Haigood, who came here for the first time in 1993 with a work entitled Cho Mu Butterfly Dreams, which was a site-specific work at the Fire Pond. Next to Joanna is Eiko, who was here for our first winter residency in 1993, and she performed Wind in the Studio Theater, which is what we called the Doris Duke Theater before it became the Doris Duke Theater. And then next to Eiko, we have Merián Soto, who was here in 1992 with the world premiere of Historias in the Studio Theater, also then the Doris Duke Theater. And then finally, right next to me is Jawole Willa Jo Zollar, came in 1988 again for the Inside Out series with 4 works. And all of these incredible artists have given us all extraordinary experiences that we have documented. We have them. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But I do want to say why we have decided to partner with Legacy Unboxed is because preservation is key to our mission, to the fulfillment of our mission. And it's important to note that the founder of the archives at Jacob's Pillow is Norton Owen. And Norton Owen is celebrating his 50th anniversary at Jacob's Pillow this summer. There's applause in the room, and I'm sure across the world with everyone watching the live stream. And we will be giving him the 2025 Jacob's Pillow Dance Award this summer. So come to our gala or tune in online and see him be celebrated, as well he should. But the idea is at Jacob's Pillow, there's really no other place in the world where you can come to study in our school, be presented on our stages, while at the same time you can connect with the history of our field. If you're a dancer who was here 20 years ago, we hold your history. If you are a new artist coming to the Pillow, you join that history. And it's so important for artists to know that forever and ever, we will hold their histories. And we hold histories of artists from all around the world. So thinking about legacy in this ephemeral art form is a key initiative for us. And so this aligns beautifully with the work that we're doing right now. So this is to ask 5 powerful people these questions, and they all can't answer all of them. So I'm gonna ask about 2 for each, but I'm gonna invite you all to add things if things come up. So first I wanna ask Liz to answer the question, how did you all come together, and what is Legacy Unboxed?
Thank you, Pam. Thank you all for being here, and to everybody live streaming. It's nice to be with you. I think it's always hard to know where to start. I was born. But when I turned 70 and began to live my 70s, I started having this feeling of wildness, and it totally surprised me. every decade has kind of a feeling about it, but this was wild. It felt like everything I knew was tumbling around. Sometimes I felt like I was on this big plateau. I mean, I know there's a drop off, it's coming, but you don't know where, so you're striding, and my wonderful friends are in and out of it. And in the midst of all that, I realized that I had come to know some things that I wanted to try to figure out how to put in a way that other people might be interested. Like, I don't like advice. So an advice column was not gonna be the way the legacy went. But what could it be? And in that, I made a trip to the Mellon Foundation to see if they would be interested in supporting this. Now, what I'm about to say could be an example of my lack of confidence or my astute reading of the history of women in dance. But I pretty much assumed they would not fund me by myself. So I had a bunch of people in mind with me, my fellow travelers, people, each one of here who influenced me deeply, people I love. There were others, but this was the group that was right with me, and sure enough, went into the meeting, sure enough, they're interested. I was thinking about this thing called the Atlas of Creative Tools, a digital commons, where we could document, process, and leave it for people at their own way of working with it. And in conversation with the program officer, she said, well, I don't know this, well, I have some other people. They didn't know it yet. But I mentioned these 4 incredible choreographers. And this program officer and I agreed we would get a planning grant. And that began this thing called Legacy Unboxed. And the unboxed piece of it is just the fact that there's sort of an expectation when you get this age that you're gonna tie everything up in a neat bow, it's all gonna be, and it doesn't feel like that. Not only is it hard to tie to things, they don't tie, but you don't want to. You keep opening the box again. You keep going in and saying, wait, there's more in there I need to work with. So that's how this all came about. And just in gratitude to a number of people who've worked by my side on this, Melanie, Aaron, and Gail, who's not with us, but began the project, and I'll tell you more about that later.
Thank you so much. So maybe you could, since you've been in conversation for a couple of days, connect us to how are you rethinking artistic legacy? And maybe, Merián, I might ask you to start us off.
I think it's on. Is it on? Yes, it's on. Okay, thank you.
And everyone has to bring the mic to their mouth, Erica reminds me, so.
Thank you. It's great to be here. One of the things that we've shared is that when we think of legacy, we think of archives and, where are the archives gonna live, et cetera. But I think one of the things that all of us share is that we're thinking about legacy as a living legacy. It's not like we're not dead yet. We're all really wanting to keep making work. For me personally, for the last 10 years, I've been making work that really looks back on and I consider these projects, I consider legacy projects. I look back on my work. I did a project about my teacher, Elaine Summers. It had multiple, and I see these projects as multifaceted, but it's about bringing back the work into the world. I made a film with my colleague Viveca Vázquez. It's called Fenomenal Rompeforma 1989-96, which looks back on a festival that I co-produced with Viveca. And, it brings back these performances by all these wonderful artists, Latinx artists, in the early 90s. So I've been involved in projects like that, of really trying to bring back the work. Right now I'm working with also another project in Puerto Rico. It's called La Escuelita Fenomenal de Rompeforma. This is a project that came out of the documentary, but also brings back some of the artists that were in the film to Puerto Rico. Now they're mature artists, to exchange. So this idea of legacy being a living thing. And I'm very interested in the archives, but for me, I'm more interested in how this, because it's dance, how the work that I've developed lives in the bodies of the people that have worked with me, and how do we, how does that get passed on, or how, so that those are the kinds of legacy projects that I've been interested in.
Wonderful, thank you. Joanna, did you want to talk a little bit about how you're thinking about rethinking artistic legacy?
Well, it kind of goes to another question about what I'm saving and what I'm looking at and the things that are important to me, and that keeps changing over time. I think at this point, just to kind of echo what Merián said about resourcing what we already have learned, or that we are in a continued state of learning, but going back to our original resources and reusing, bringing the knowledge into our relationships and kind of shifting our perspectives, which is something that I think that has happened in this cohort, and it's been really profound. But also kind of reviewing, I don't know, what it means to be alive. And this journey to me, even though it's so inextricably linked to the art making, it's just an enormous gift in other ways. I mean, I was talking the other day about, the flowers growing and being in the mountains, and, being an artist is really kind of a way of life, a way of thinking, a way of receiving, a way of discovery. And so, but when I think of my archive, of what I want to leave is the depth of that curiosity and kind of the breadth of kind of the understanding about where we are, this like amazing experience that we get to have, and and those who try to disrupt it in negative ways. But it's very, very short, and I think that we can all attest to that. It was 5 minutes ago, that first performance here, but just being able to be somewhere, to be present. That's what I want to, that's how I'm thinking about my archive, how to pass on the power of presence.
That's beautiful. And yesterday I was a part of a conversation and sort of asked myself, well, what would I want to hold on to of these artists? What would I want others to know? And I want them to know the work. I want them to know about the process of the work, but I also want people to know about the wisdom, how they thought about life, the questions they asked, the curiosity. I just think that's wonderful. And to think about how you might record that, I think is really important. So, Joanna, you talked about relationships. I wonder if you all could talk about how you, when you partner with people, collaborators, discuss with other artists, your students, how do you archive or record or hold the history of the relationships that you've had that have made those works possible? And I wonder if Eiko could say a few words about that.
Okay, so I think, and this might be assumption, I think better when I'm in a dialogue. So I'm very grateful for the friendship that had been developed with me and my past students. I don't choose them, I don't select them. Certain students are keeping in touch with, and eventually they invited themselves to become my helper or collaborator. And important thing is I had a long career, because I'm a dropout, meaning I have a long career for the age, that as I can coma. And that's a relationship, right? But when you have such a small company, people leave you alone for most of the night, assuming we have a private life. But I'm a workaholic. So now that I sort of work outside of the box, I unboxed myself before this invitation. But when I don't think I was boxed in before, but I realized once I unboxed myself,
people didn't really know me sometimes. Sometimes people thought about I was a quiet Japanese person. I'm far from it. But that took me relationships. Those who knew me as a chatty, opinionated, loud person, to the audiences who knew me differently. And that worked well because I had the idea of transforming myself on stage to the different people. But given the circumstance, and given I'm 73, I feel a strong need to dialectically to bring myself, my desire to be transforming myself, yet to be who I am, that I used to live in a dressing room before I get on the stage. So the ways I started to do my solo work is going out to the street, and Jacob's Pillow have done that with me, not only here, but also in the Pittsfield,
yeah.
right? So keep unboxing myself, but then you go into this intimate conversations, whether it's with audience or with friends. And that is finding what I have always had, but I didn't really have a time to tap, right? So with those people, I so strongly respect, but it's not only respect, it is to realize, despite the respect I have, I belong. And therefore, I can be talkative, and they bring me new ideas, and I can respond. So I just couldn't be more grateful. And it takes not only us artists, but the presenters, curators, audience members, all in a conversation, how to deal with now, how did we deal with the past, and what you want to do, and I want to do, with whom, how, and then share. And that's really bringing me into the forefront. Can't be thankful to every single one of you who are here.
Thank you, Eiko. Jawole, you had an unboxing when you founded Urban Bushwomen, and you made the decision to have a different chapter, a next chapter. So you're thinking about the legacy of your company, but also your individual legacy. Could you maybe talk about how all of the relationships that built the company, how would we look back on them, and how are you thinking about legacy in terms of those relationships?
Thank you, first of all, Pam. Thank you for hosting and inviting us here, and thank you for Liz for this incredible vision and bringing us together and in these conversations. And I do want to say, because something we've been talking about is that a video is one singular moment in time, and it may not be the best video. You had 3 great performances, but the one that was videoed. And so we are in a single moment in time, and I just want to context today, we had news about the NEA, people's grants being defunded, and all of that. So that is a context for our conversation today. We might have a different things to say last week or tomorrow, but it is the thing that's in the room with us. So in terms of looking at this decision to how to look at archives, what are personal papers, what is personal, when your work has been your life, and then that 40-year work with Urban Bushwomen is now a different part of my life, and I've chosen to be an independent artist at this point. And so what is that legacy, and what is that work, and how do they talk to each other, and where do they go, and where do they belong, and what is the archiving of these different chapters of life? So I think I have more questions than answers. I'm really, when I always hear about, they donated their personal papers, I think it was Arthur Mitchell that donated to Columbia, his personal papers, and then the company archive. And I'm like, I don't even know what makes that separation, or how you look at that. So that's one of the questions that I'm trying to disentangle. What was the we, what is the I, that I'm now an independent artist and looking at new legacies of creating. I'm having a great time, thinking just what I want to do when I want to do it, if I want to do it. as opposed to organizationally, where you have to think differently. You have to think about the employees and what you're holding. And so I don't know, that's what I'm one of the things that I'm hoping to get more clarity is how to understand the difference in the archives and the difference in the chapters of our lives. Because there could be another chapter after this one where I do something completely different, and then now that's another chapter, I could become a filmmaker. And so then how does that get archived? So, yeah, I have more questions than answers.
Well, you're only at the start of your research as a group, so that makes perfect sense. There's a question I've been burning to ask all of you, so you all get to answer this one, and that is, what were some of the radical, dangerous, risky decisions you made in creating your work, and how could an archive hold that? So I'm going to start with Liz.
You know, I did a lot of planning for this, but I didn't plan for this question. So what first comes to mind is I seem to have been gifted by my parents and perhaps my upbringing and the relationship that was in that household in the Midwest between sort of a quest for aesthetics that were good, beautiful, and true to our beliefs and our values, but also very political, progressive Jewish household. And I think the swinging back and forth between those worlds set up a personal internal demand to myself that as much as I might be trying to understand myself, as my mom always said, you're not the only person in the world, what is the relationship of that to anything else? So when I look at these radical things, it's more like the twists and turns that I took in order to respond to what I thought was happening in the world, or because I got a request from the dean of the Harvard Law School, 60th anniversary of the Nuremberg trials, would I make a piece about genocide? And I said, no. I actually said, I thought you could make a dance about anything, but I thought, wait, there are limits. I can't do that. And then she, my dear friend Martha Minow, said, no, I'll help you. So she came into the rehearsal room and stayed in relationship with us all the way through. We didn't make a dance about genocide, although we referenced it. We made a dance about human rights law and took this historical journey through starting in Nuremberg and ending with whatever's going on in the criminal court today. We have lots of criminal courts to look into at this point today. So I think of that as an example of where I didn't think I was prepared, but I had to be, and make that turn. Also choosing to leave, start the dance exchange, start it, because I was trying, it was an IWE question. I was told I could get money for dancing with old people like I was doing at that time, and I called up Health and Human Services, which no longer, well, it will never exist again, but I was just, they kept saying, who are you? And I said, I'm Liz Lerman. They said, no, who are you? And I realized that at the end of the day, I needed to be an organization, and that's why I founded the Dance Exchange. They didn't trust the individual. Then I needed to leave to become this person. Now, how do we archive all this? What I want to just say is that the thing that's spectacular about archiving right now, as I understand it, is, first of all, we have some fantastic archivists, some of them are in the room, that are helping us figure out what's a paper worth keeping, what's a video worth not having one or two copies of, what's missing that we have to have a conversation about. Wait, where are we going to put this kind of thing? And we're getting ideas all the time. I was approached about becoming a robot and doing a large language model that's going to do, which I think is actually interesting for archives. I think it's going to be, so I find it pretty exciting that there are multiple formats as we look back, as we stay here, and as we think, as my biology colleague at my school said to me, you know, Liz, in 50 years, it'll be cyborgs looking at your videos. So that was fun to think about.
Shall we just go
Yes, go down
Okay, well, so I'm thinking about volunteer radicalism. I would think two things come to my mind. One is moving from New York and going, yeah, that was a big one, and moving to San Francisco and starting a dance company, something that I tried to coach people not to do these days, but it's like it's so difficult. But I can say that these two things have been also have provided me with a lot of opportunities that I'm grateful for. But being responsible for others, kind of inundating myself with administrative tasks and kind of navigating the world of funding, all of which are just very, very weighted and very difficult to balance with an artistic life. That whole thing that I spoke about earlier, the power of presence, is like, oh, the power of lifting. It's just, you have to be very strong and really persistent, committed to that. And I still feel that it is part of my, kind of my risk-taking, right? It's part of risk-taking. But it has allowed me to be an artist in many ways too, right? So all of those things that I just complained about are the things that facilitated this other thing. And then the other is the scale that I've been attracted to. There's plenty of risk involved in just the very nature of how I see choreography and working with volume and space and moving bodies up and down and in higher areas. But also it's been very difficult to produce. So it has limited my opportunity to actually make work, although it has been the thing that has been the most satisfying. Each project is incredibly fulfilling. I feel like I've had, and all of us I know do feel like we've had lives of great adventure. I feel that, every time somebody gives me permission to climb something or, be at the top of the, City Hall or, going to places that people haven't been in 100 years or more or ever. And how to document or archive that. I think we've been having such rich conversations about having all this material, but how does that translate into experience? Because that's the thing that we're trying to convey. One of the things that we have referenced in our conversations was the Ailey exhibit and stepping into that space and being just...
That was the Ailey exhibit at the Whitney Museum.
Yeah. And having that first moment be so powerful that it just like kind of knocked you. I remember walking in and just crying immediately. It was so emotional. But I remember crying when I saw Judith Jamison do Cry. Like I had the exact same feeling. So that I think in part of our conversations is like, well, you can go and read something and look at a video, but does that actually convey the experience of the work? And so, we haven't come to any conclusions or plans or figured it out yet, but that for me, it feels like an important piece to try to capture. And some of it, I think, through that conversation with Patsy and Norton the other day about the archivist being the portal, right? And that your storytelling and the way that you curate even the conversation leading deeper and deeper into the process or into the work is also a way to elicit that kind of experience as well.
Thank you. Eiko.
The danger sometimes is retroactively felt. So one gossip is Eiko Otake river project where we float in a river, active R-I-V-E-R, not L. And we actually come from upstream with a driftwood, and then we dance, and audience are in a river banks, and then we go disappear after 1 hour to the downstream. That sounds simple. Sometimes dam get released the night before, we did not know. Sometimes, despite the test, the water was not polluted, but the river bed was polluted. So it involved certain trips to the hospital. But those are the physical danger, right? But emotional danger I think it was me being in Fukushima, post-nuclear disaster Fukushima. And then realizing I want to be here, I want to perform here, I want to memorize here, I want to think about it, but in a place where I cannot bring audience. So how do I task myself as a conduit? And that is being my ongoing question. I'm already Eiko. Nobody really questioned me. I have a name. I know where my parents came from, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I know where I came from, as a state in Japan. But whom I can channel. And it's easy to be inspired, but it's harder to really examine what is a capacity I have to channel somebody I really admire. So that's a big danger to assume yourself as a conduit, but then what is your standpoint as a conduit? Right? So those are things. And obviously, leaving Eiko and Koma's store was architect. But again, I think it's live and learn, and we don't really assess it as a freelance artist, independent artist. We don't really have an assessment, but you have findings. So I have started a duet project after years of solo. And in a duet project, I just go into that place where she and I, or he and I, or they and I can meet. So kind of abandoning my art for the work that two people can come up together, either with regret or without regret. That's even not promised. So those are the dangerous things retroactively. But when I start, I was full of desire.
I think our lives are full of danger. As artists, I mean, I feel like what makes us, our work impactful is that we take those risks. So when you ask those risks, I think, oh God, there's been a lot of risk taking. I think, for me, looking back, I wanted to be a ballet dancer, and then I was very injured. And I had to change my body. I had to change my body, and I did it. That was the kind of, the risk was that I said I was not gonna quit. That was a risk. I said, I'm dedicating myself to dance, no matter what. And I'm gonna cry because I have that freaking same risk now, because I said, I'm gonna dance till I die, and now as an aging dancer, that's hard. It's hard to keep that commitment. But anyway, other risks. I feel like I've also had the good fortune that I had a job at one point. I got a university teaching position, and I took a risk with this kind of ladder work that I've been doing, where I decided I'm not going to choreograph a step. I'm not making steps. That's not what I do. And I also started dancing with tree branches and roots, and and I don't think I would have done that work without having tenure. So, it was it was a risk I took because I knew that I couldn't be fired. I didn't know if my work was gonna be received at all. I was coming from the late 90s, all the funding dried up, and I decided that I had to sell to survive. I have work that I didn't sell, and I said and that I love, because I've been working with salsa since I started. Since I started being an artist, I was using that language and exploring it in my works. But I said, nah, I'm doing salsa. I'm going for the bands, you know. And I had the great good fortune that I was able to perform with a salsa band on stage. I think that was probably one of the joyous moments of my career, was to be on that stage with this whole salsa band, and I'm sitting next to the director and telling the director of the salsa band when the cue is or whatever. So, but I went from that to dance, to just going back. Then I said, okay, I don't have to earn a living that way with a job, so I can pursue the passion of the dancer, and I'm very much a dancer. And how do we document that? Oh, and the relationships, I worked with my husband, Pepon Osorio, for, 12, 15 years. And when we had children, and our careers were growing, and his was like exploding, it made sense for us not to work together, and that was a very, very scary moment. But I think that's when I went into the salsa. It was like, okay. So those are some of those examples. I think, how do you document that? How do you archive that? I think storytelling around the actual work, that kind of, I think that's really important. That's one of the things that we've been talking about, because we pass the work on through bodies, including in the archives, the interviews and the oral histories from all those people that we've collaborated with. I think that's one way.
I just want to say that you talking about the storytelling, I have to have a shout out for our current Pillow Voices episode is about Carmen de Lavalade. And you just hear her at various stages of her time here, including her directing a class. So what do you learn about a choreographer from how they teach? And I do think that I'm just going to say the care that our team of Norton Owen, Patsy Gay, Sumi Matsumoto take with artists, how they care for them and make sure that while they're here, we get as much information as possible, and then think about how we remix it to make it live today, is such an important part of what we do here. So, Jawole, you get to bring us home on the risky, dangerous decision.
I've had a chance to now think about it. So there's two things. The first thing is when I formed the company, it was really listening to myself, listening and believing that inner voice that was saying things to me about what to do was really strong and valid. So when I premiered the company, so to speak, it was at the Ethnic Folk Arts Center in New York at that time, and I did it on June 30th, and at that time, people were saying, oh, don't do your concert in the summer, because this is 1984, there's not a lot of activity, and everybody goes to the Hamptons, and I was like, well, not where I live. I was living in the Bronx, working class Dominican community, no, we're not going to the Hamptons. So I started to think about who might come, so my goal was 30 people per night. If I got 30 people per night, I was like, okay, that would be great. And everybody was like, oh, this is a terrible time, don't do it, but it turned out that rehearsal space was easy and accessible and much cheaper. So I did it, and then, I did the press release and I sent it out, and so then I got word that the New York Times was coming to cover the concert, and wrote a rave review and a feature. And then people said, well, it's gonna be really full. I was like, so, sometimes when something's overwhelming, I start to make it small in my brain to cope with it. I was like, that's like I just come from Tallahassee where I went to grad school. I was like, well, that's like the Tallahassee paper. It's like the New York Times is the local paper. So there was a line around the block. But I thought, wow, one review could have that much power. That's actually wonderful and frightening. Mm-hmm. Then I think the big, I love improvisation. I come from a jazz family, jazz lovers, and improvisation is the heart of the musical form. And so this project was called Heat with Craig Harris, and it was Craig Harris was the composer with 5-piece band, 3 poets, they were performance poets. They were called Thought Music, Lori Carlos, Robbie McCauley, Jessica Hagedorn. And this was before they were calling it spoken word and all that. And then, 7 dancers and 2 children. And so I said, well, let's do a performance jam. It was at the residency creating the work. So in other words, we're not gonna plan this. And we had choreographed some things, and I said to the dancer, let all that go. Just find the timing that is about connection. The poets were making up the writing on the spot. Craig was creating music on the spot. And we didn't know what was gonna happen. And we were just having a good time of discovery. And in some ways it didn't feel that brave because I grew up around that, and I worked with Diane McIntyre, and that was so much a way of working. But I think if you were to just look at that videotape of that as a single moment in time, you would not know that story behind that, this beautiful poem that's now part of Shelter, Bilongo by Lori Carlos. She made it up right at that spot in doing that. So much of it, so much happened because I said, let's just let go, and whatever happens, happens. If it's great, we hold on to those moments, or we think about it, and if it's not. And one of the children at the time, because I was trying to figure, so I said, okay, your job is just gonna be, you're gonna because it's about homelessness and all different kinds of things. So I said, you're gonna get up and walk from one space to another. They were 3 and 9, or 3 and 7. And I said, so you're just gonna lay down in one spot, and then you're gonna get up and move to another, and then you're gonna get up and move to another. And that's, people who know Shelter, that's now a part of the work. And the 3-year-old started doing a whole other thing. I mean, she's like, and she's doing this whole material, and afterwards, the other person, the 7-year-old, Pine Threadgill, for those of you who know her, asked her, like, what were you doing? And she, and she said, you were supposed to do, blah, blah, blah. And she said, my heart told me not to. And isn't that a powerful thing? A powerful, risky thing that you're supposed to do this, but your heart said to do something different. Never mind what the director said.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for those stories. That's spectacular. So we've also been talking about the tension between the generosity of these efforts in preservation. The archive is a gift for future generations. They'll be able to watch this talk. They will see your work, etc. But thinking about your legacies is also kind of a protective act. It's a fight against erasure. What feels selfish about this endeavor, and what feels selfless about it? And I'm going to let anyone who wants to say something.
I guess in my case, I think I recognize it as selfish. I love my work, I love what I do, and I've dedicated my life to it. But the selflessness part comes from recognizing that it is, I've been gifted with moments of great recognition of something way beyond me. And I think that goes in my work, and I think that's what I want to pass on. But I find that it's not so much in the archive that goes into the library, it's in those bodies, it's in those other thinking body minds, feeling spirits. So how do you pass on the spirit is because I really feel like my life's work has been with how to dance the energetic body, and how do we pass that on?
just to stay for a minute with what you're just talking about, Merián, in our early discussions with archivists and librarians, we found actually a very warm pool of people also interested in this. They wouldn't say it as beautifully as you just did, but they recognized that there are limits to the way in which we save things, and that some of the most important things, and especially in our world, is lost. So part of the, just so you know, part of the funding for this is coming from the public library part of the Mellon Foundation, not just the art side, because they are eager also for us to figure out, or help them figure out, what might be possible. And you know, we kind of fight about it, because every time we start leaning in on one side, we say, well, yeah, but what about the body? What about the body? We come back, what about the body? So we leave that open to all of you. I think though the question also underlying your question, Pam, I'm not sure it's entirely gendered, but my experience as a female in this world is that this selflessness problem is deep. It's really hard for any of us to say I. We're constantly in the we world, and some of that, I have no apology about it. As Jawole was saying this morning, it is part of who we are. It's how we think about things, who we bring along, all of that. But then there's also a part where you go, well, wait a minute. I started dancing with older people in 1975. There's some books out now about creative aging, and I'm not in them. I was there a million years ago, and that's maddening. Do I stand up for myself? Do I say, wait? Do I say, go look, archives, make sure you cover that? So this is, to me, this is part of the tension. There is this deep love for passing things on and all that we work so hard to share. And I would posit, if you look at the histories of our organizations, you will see enormous effort put into the way the people working with us get to also grow, the way in which we support the evolution of every single person, which is not the case in all arts organizations. So, you know, I was thinking later as we went down the line, you know, talking and dancing. I was there early. Technology and dancing, I was there early. Why do I want people to know this? Because they just think I'm a nice girl? Or do I want them to know it because it fed so much of what I do? And that is still a quandary. So my hope is with the archives that it's not just us talking about ourselves, that we have lots of people coming in helping to talk about who we are, how we've impacted them, what they see in it, and also their own work, taking our work and moving on, or doing their work next to our work and then letting people say, what's that like? All the ways. So it doesn't in the end come back, yeah, but make sure you know I started dancing with old people. So,
Anyone else want to take that on?
Again, inspired by what has been said, I'm a foreigner. I'm not a citizen, and clearly from speaking, everyone knows that I came as a foreigner, and I remain foreigner. So that has a flip side, both sides to it, you know. So every time I'm being invited to any table, I'm surprised. I continue to be surprised. But then, should I be so modest to the point, oh, no, I don't qualify? You know, I like to imagine this group. I feel it. I feel that the embrace. Also, I was never a ballet girl. I was never a physical education girl. I was a leader. I was a talker. I'm really physically unfit, which many people find it unbelievable because I now belong for a very long time in the dance world. So the fact I am the dance artist, I don't even say that usually, but movement-based artist, is also, could I be so humble to say, oh, I'm not? Or could I stay here? I am physically unfit, but I continue to perform. And my first work in a Whitney Museum is long before the old dance things were so often happening now. Well, we have a long history with that before, but Command I were lying down all months naked. And that is dance. It's hardly debatable. But I am in this community. And for me to keep thanking the fact you have me here is a part of my act to acknowledge. So thank you all for that.
I wondered if, just to pick up on what Liz said a minute ago, she started talking about what she could envision as people coming in and speaking about the work. And what other future ideas do you have about legacy in this? Now that you've been in the thick of it for a few days, do you have early thoughts about the vision of how your legacies might extend?
Okay, I don't want to talk too much, but I'll just say, I have had one for a long time. And this is this atlas of creative tools, a digital commons. Artists put the creative tools that they've evolved and developed along with the origin of the tool, how to, the application of it, how people are using it, adjacent philosophies, all kind, and when you immerse yourself in this, amazing things happen, because I've tried it at a few locations, including Wesleyan, when we first started working on the science choreography stuff. I am embattled by technology. I know as soon as I think I've caught up with it, I'm behind again. And so I'm beginning to wonder actually about how that could work, what kind of help we need in order to jump into the future that would allow for this kind of sharing. But for me, the reason it's legacy is that I have been a veteran tool maker. I think going against the tide of my generation, well, because we were taught to keep everything mysterious and obscure. But actually, it's so much more interesting not to try to articulate, to try to figure out what the thing is. What was that creative moment that made you do that thing with that 3-year-old? What were the conditions that made it possible for her to even hear her heart? What had you done, Jawole, as a director to make that even possible? That's what I'm interested in. And that is replicable. Not the same thing, not the exact same thing, because of course that child was unique, but I'm interested in figuring that out, but I struggle in this realm of, and the other thing I just want to say, bigger even still, is a belief that we are in a moment where performance, installation, and exhibition are at the crossroads, and that we have a lot to teach each other, moving from the proscenium stage into exhibition and even into the glass boxes. I even posed, even though this is called Legacy Unboxed, I posed to the Library of Congress, could we have something called a choreographic mind encased? And could we actually figure out what were the technological things we could use that would make that like living, really living? So I think we're in the thick of some wonderful opportunity and a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I would say the technology and performance is the intersection of exhibit, technology, performance. And I was thinking about when I went to see David Gordon's live archivology, is that this was? And so he had his archives both visually, it was performance, he was talking, and inexplicably, David of all people, suddenly had an audience discussion. And this was radically not David. So there's in the middle of this discussion. And, and then I think, well, what if there had been a whole exhibit around that so that you could, my house is full of exhibition catalogs. Because if I go, I'm almost certainly gonna get a catalog. And I have probably way too many, because I love being able to go back and read and think and look at the pictures and connect, and I use it for research as well. And so something of that nature where you have the ephemeral experience, you have the thing that you can take with you, you have the research and the context, and you have performance. All of that to me is, I think, what technology can now do. Before I saw the Ailey exhibit, I saw the David Bowie exhibit, and it was just like, wow, the archives, and then you go into the performance and you feel it. And that was the same thing with the Ailey exhibit. I want to feel it. I want people to feel something about what they're experiencing. And it's okay if there's a distancing, because sometimes when you go to the museum, you just sit back and you want a distance and you want, so to have all of that experience and not just one.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to just say on that note of hope, I'm so excited about this initiative, and really thank you for taking time to think about it, because you have impacted many artists in our field, and that continues by you taking time to grapple with this issue is really important. So thank you. Thank you all for being here in person and online. And we hope to see you for Festival 2025 this summer and the opening of the new Doris Duke Theater, which is right over there. So all the best, and thank you all. Round of applause, please. Thank you. Thanks so much.